Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. So everybody knows that it's World Telecommunications and Technology Day in Africa, and I suppose we just wanted to take a bit of time out to also, in our way, talk about, just the role of telecoms and how much it's achieved in Africa, and this immense opportunity that, the digital economy poses for Africa. And all of this is built on the back of, telecommunications infrastructure. So this is the one thing that we've got to get right in Africa, is to make sure that, we build an infrastructure and we provide an infrastructure that will not only serve our immediate needs, but that we're forward thinking, that we can build something that will last for the foreseeable future and for the generations that will follow us. It's a big privilege for me today to welcome Bora Varliachi. I know that he doesn't need any introduction because he's a very familiar face in the telco sector in South Africa and in Africa as a whole. And I spoke to Bora last week and I said to him, "Oh, Bora, don't you just want to come and share some of your knowledge?" And, he's always keen, and he always, if he has the time, he's a very busy person. He will take some time out and he will share some of his insights with us. For those of you who don't know, Bora is the founder and CEO of a company called Digital Things. I'm going to ask him to just tell you a little bit more about Digital Things, but there's very few people, in my opinion, that knows more about this sector than Bora. He's got incredibly good oversight. He works with a lot of companies, supports on due diligence, and is also responsible for the annual research of the Digital Council Africa. And last year just delivered a phenomenal piece of work, and we're still getting requests from all over the world of people asking us to share our research with him. So Bora, welcome, and thank you very much for giving us some of your time today and coming online and sharing some of your knowledge that you work so hard to collect.
Juanita, thank you very much for your really, deep introduction, and I'll try to live up to the expectations that you set with that. And first of all, thank you and Digital Council Africa team for inviting me to take part in this session, which is meant to recognize the importance of digital evolution in societies and its impact on economies on this special date that marks the World Telecommunications and Information Society Day. So given the short notice, obviously, I didn't necessarily have time to prepare as much as I'd like for this session. So I do not have any slides if there are any expectations over there. So it will be me, my voice, and my face for next 40 to 45 minutes. So apologies for that, but nevertheless, I would like to spend this time available to us in unpacking global digital service trends and together with underlying enablers and challenges to overcome that would enable us to realize full benefits of digital developments, technology-driven innovation, and stay relevant within this era of digital enlightenment, as I call it. First of all, I would like to start with recognizing and congratulating all the stakeholders who contributed to advancing digital service penetration on the continent, particularly within the last 2 decades, where we have seen the connectivity or connected number of population from a small fraction of 1% to more than half population mark today. I think this is remarkable. And namely, I would like to recognize and congratulate technology innovators and OEMs who unlock the potential of the technology and continues to improve performance and unlock new ways of connecting more and more people, sensors, or devices, communication and digital services providers. And without them, we wouldn't have this connection getting to each one of us for their continuous and resilient efforts, and not only for connectivity, but also all other digital services that they are providing in masses, as well as entrepreneurs who are instrumental and essential in expanding this digital services reach through their deep understanding of the communities and community issues. Hence, they are able to further enhance the service delivery and improve penetration of these services. And they are the pioneers of innovation on the continent, to be honest. And finally, also the end users who are embrace very quickly these digital services and get on board with it and make use of these services. And through that mass adoption, we are able to indeed to continue this momentum of providing innovation and more services to masses in Africa. And policymakers and regulators for their acknowledgement at least of importance of not being left behind in this digital era, and their efforts in supporting the industry with making essential services available and supporting the penetration of digital service adoption through relevant policies and resources. And I'll come to that, in the later part of the discussion, because it's an extremely important issue, particularly nowadays, where enablement of an environment that brings all the stakeholders together is key on advancement towards realizing the full benefits of a digital economy. Last but not the least, obviously, Digital Council Africa for its continuous efforts to lobby and create awareness within the key stakeholders to advance digital infrastructure deployments and service enhancement. So I think, to start with, well done to all for this significant and unprecedented progress to date for achieving the digital service penetration and beginning a journey towards a fully fledged digital economy on the continent. I use the word, unprecedented purposefully here because, if you look into all other key essential services and industries such as electricity, water, sanitation, transportation, all these services and requirements have been there for a century at least. Yet, the penetration rate like electrification, access to clean water and all still remains accessible to less than a quarter of a population in most countries. Whereas, within 2 decades, we are talking about more than half the population connected on Africa. It is, again, a massive achievement comparing to all other essential services. So you can always look at the glass half full or half empty, saying other half is still yet to be connected. I think that's where the new target and objective is going forward. Yet, 20 years to connect half population, and there's a growing number of population as well. Congratulations to all. I think it really requires and deserves a recognition on this particular date. Pursuant of unlocking the potential of digital economy is an ever-evolving undertaking. Also, the goalpost in this is also constantly moving as well, because the pace of innovation leveraging the digital services is unbelievable. And what is quite surprising is how quickly we are able to adapt to this change, and how we are indeed almost overnight able to change our behaviors and attitude towards adoption of digital technologies. As we have all witnessed during this COVID-19 pandemic, overnight, everybody moved to their homes and started working from their homes remotely. Probably to this session, most of the audience is joining from their homes or other destinations rather than a large office as we used to preside. And we also see we have also seen the massive spike in adoption of online education, e-commerce, e-health type of services, and this is a bit shocking because this is just under a year that we have started to see this shift, and after a year everybody is very comfortable and happy in the new way of the things. So I'm not going to today talk about the impact of broadband penetration or other statistics around it, because there are lots of news articles, studies, analysis available on those topics, some of which became cliches. And indeed, as you mentioned, in Digital Council Africa annual report, there are lots of numbers and statistics on each of those areas as well. I'll be happy to engage with the interested audience if they have any particular questions around those. But today I rather spend valuable time that everybody spared to attend this session in unlocking a bit of three key pillars of the digital economy, which are digital services, digital infrastructure enabling those services, and other key factors that for us to move towards realizing the benefits of a fully digitized economy, which are funding, resources, policies, and regulations underlying all those developments. So I particularly want to focus on those three areas and trends around those. Where are we today and what to expect going forward, at what pace? So as you can appreciate, each of these topics are candidates of series of webinars indeed to have a deep dive into each area. So we are not necessarily going to have a deep dive, but at least we will be able to cover hopefully the key important factors surrounding these elements and these three key pillars that will enable us to move forward in the journey of digitization. So if we begin with the digital service trends, I think it will only make sense to look into digital services in end user segments, which I typically address them in consumer, enterprise, and industry. From a consumer segment point of view, as we all know, most of the legacy services such as voice, instant messaging, and even data connectivity today became mainstream and commoditized in most markets. And from these legacy services, the shift has been towards introduction of new wave of digital services, which obviously are running over the enabled highways of data connectivity and all, and the wider reach of the connectivity to the masses. But this new wave of services today is mostly driven by video-driven digital entertainment and collaboration, as well as social networking and financial services in the consumer segment. And going forward, I think, where we see these services evolving further is, a global trends point of view. Gaming is definitely there, but more and more personalized automation, as well as other lifestyle services ranging all the way from travel services to insurance services that today digital service providers are moving to in a wider range of services in partnership with lots of other innovative application and service companies. In terms of enterprise segment, if you look into there, again, what we see beyond the tipping point today is really move and adoption of cloud services. And most of the traditionally in-house managed IT services are being outsourced today, moving to a cloud infrastructure. Either those are private clouds or public clouds. Regardless, there's a constant move towards cloud adoption, and we are beyond the tipping point on this adoption. So that drives quite a lot of requirements in terms of broadband infrastructure as well as the data centers. And obviously, that goes hand in hand, because if you don't have a reliable, good, affordable connectivity everywhere, it is a bit difficult to move your services to cloud. But in the markets and countries where this has achieved a certain level of penetration and quality, service quality, we see this happening very quickly. And most of the also service providers, communication service providers, and today's digital service providers are moving their service portfolio in partnership with the OTTs such as Amazon Web Services, Microsoft's, IBM's in addressing this enterprise requirements and move to the cloud, and not only with storage services, but it goes all the way from basic hosting to software as a service type of offerings to this enterprise. And initially, the focus has been mostly on large enterprises, but we see this is shifting highly to SMEs today, because again, with the impact of pandemic and the acceleration of remote working and all, there is an opportunity indeed to develop customized collaboration and connectivity services most businesses do require to ensure productivity between the business and its employees wherever they are. So on the industrial side, I mean, if you look into penetration and disruption of industrial digitization, I mean, it's been remarkable as well. In each and every industry that we look into, there is almost a resemblance of science fiction. 20 years ago, I mean, whatever we have seen in the science fiction movies are becoming reality today. There is a wide use of digital technologies in these industries, and it ranges from infrastructure to automation, robotics, healthcare, and transportation, including, I mean, human transporting drones, self-driving cars, and there are endless use of technology in the industry, whichever industry we look into. And one thing to recognize, though, quite important on this space is really the specific requirements of each of these applications. They are not the same, and there is no one-fit-all kind of approach. Each of these industrial use and applications have varying reliability, resilience, and performance requirements that needs to be met in the journey of digitization. Therefore, I mean, each of this industrial, digitization and use of technology also can have their own, their full socioeconomic impact and dependencies. Nevertheless, I mean, again, it doesn't take away from the fact that it is important to understand the impact of those services, because I think this is the key of my message today that I will get to, is we need to be really cognizant of why we are moving on the digitization journey and what these services mean from a socioeconomic impact point of view, because that's the angle. And because of the very fast advancement of technology and in an accelerating manner, sometimes we get confused greatly. And I often hear excitement discussions and big articles about 4G, 5G, fiber penetration, number of Wi-Fi hotspots, etc. I mean, we need to be very cautious about statistics and discussions around technology-based statistics in particular, because again, I mean, we really need to focus on the end outcome that we want to achieve rather than what the intermediary statistics and requirements are. For example, it's meaningless, in my opinion, to track the performance on a number of base stations that runs the latest technology if nobody is making use of it or cannot make use of it for various reasons. So what matters really is the impact and services delivered over these technologies and networks. So, because I mean, some of these networks indeed made of various technologies, not only one medium. Therefore, I mean, it is more meaningful, in my opinion, to talk about efficiencies achieved through the development of the end goals and end services such as e-health and online education and smart cities and grids, etc. For example, I mean, it matters more to measure the increase on the number of patients served or waiting time reduced or travel times avoided in an e-health service rather than number of clinics that are connected with a broadband. Because I mean, sometimes we see the hospital or clinic connected with a fiber that serves to a Wi-Fi spot, half time works on the reception or not. So how much impactful it is? I mean, is it the real end goal? So, or from an education point of view, if we take the same example, number of students that have been accommodated through use of digital technologies who otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to attend to an education, formal education. I mean, that should be the target and goal for an outcome on the digital agenda, in my opinion. Same goes to industrial use or smart cities or smart networks from electricity and water point of view. Maybe we can make measure more about the leakages, wasted reduction of the wasted resources through these smart technologies, rather than just making a goal of smart of something. So I think it's really important to be very clear in terms of the expected outcomes, because when we put targets in terms of number of facilities connected to broadband, it falls halfway. It is meaningful because it's the intermediary measure. But at the end of the day, what is important is the impact of those and what we really want to achieve at the end of the day. So with that said, I think, because setting the end goals with the real impact that we want to make really moves the conversation to a wider range of enabling factors. Those are not only about connectivity, because if we want to achieve a social impact outcome, it goes hand in hand with end user devices, fiscal policies, stimulation plans, digital literacy plans, applications and training, resources and resource planning to achieve those. And again, if we just talk about connectivity, we leave all those factors out, and it is not necessarily going to get us where we want to go. For example, in terms of a number of connected schools, if we are just measuring that, it doesn't tell us anything about if the online content is available. Is the connection really available to the audience, which are the students on their locations? Do they have end user devices? Does the educators have decent online teaching skills? Is the content from an online education point of view, quality content is available? And what is the indeed net impact of the outcome in terms of quality of education or number of students served? I think that those are the facts that we need to talk about. So it goes also, from a business point of view as well. Sorry, there is a question I see coming. Before I continue, from Juanita, question relating to South Africa's readiness for participation in the digital economy. What will cause greatest success and what will cause us to fail? I think I will cover that. I think, what is really important from a South African perspective is enabling and removing barriers in terms of getting these digital services to the end users, because we are, from a South Africa point of view, I think a bit more blessed in terms of number of entrepreneurs and number of initiations going on in this country. We have seen many first to world kind of business models, from an open access infrastructure to lots of entrepreneurs indeed developing special services that is targeted to certain communities. I think there's a lot of good resources. I think what we need to unlock from a South African perspective is really making all the resources available, and in particular spectrum today, which is a very hot topic, and we had a few weeks ago a dedicated discussion with the Free Market Foundation as well. But I'll get to that point probably a bit later in the discussion. So, if I continue with regards to where I left, some of the recommendations, therefore, in terms of setting the end goal goes to the business and entrepreneurs as well. Because, sometimes some of the clients or prospect clients ask me, what should we do to be the leading 5G wireless service provider? It puzzles me, because new ventures should clearly identify the use cases and service gaps or the problems that they are trying to serve, rather than being technology focused, because all those problems may have again specific connectivity or technology requirements, and it is often more than one technology, to be honest. So when I hear just being a fiber operator, leading 5G, the starting point shouldn't be that. Starting point should be really what is the expected outcome from deployment of these businesses and what they really try to achieve and solve. So informed listener would also know that there are no, one fit all approach, and all use cases have their particular requirements. For example, a video streaming or call, video streaming or video call have a higher bandwidth capacity where latency is also important. But I mean, when we look into automation kind of thing like self-driving cars or factory automation, I mean, your performance and latency becomes the most important over there, whereas some of the applications like IoT sensors in a farm measuring the soil humidity. I mean, the data is low, few times a day reading is okay. Nobody would care about few seconds even delay in transmission of data. Those are all different elements, and I think I mean the evolution of new networks and technologies do recognize that they have to address most of these requirements needs different solutions in a holistic manner. So therefore, I mean, I would like to move a bit more in terms of what these digital service trends have implications over digital infrastructure and how we proceed to evolve our digital infrastructure to meet those digital service requirements. Again, I mean, if you look into the past and how we start the journey on the continent, most of the initial networks, fixed or wireless, were built on to meet technical requirements around voice services and basic messaging services. These are really, I mean, very light applications in terms of data volumes within the context of today. Hence, I mean, most of the initial networks were based on copper on the fixed side, and 2G network that's able to cover tens of kilometers with a single site was good enough to deliver reasonable quality voice or short messaging services at the time. So at the time, I think, I mean, the biggest focus was more on the coverage, and anything else really, quality of service, capacity and all, wasn't the main target at the early days. Then we moved into the data services, which, with basic internet searching or basic email services, and all 3G networks were good enough to cover that kind of requirements, which required a bit of densification. Then comes the 4G, more data, video, whatsoever, and more dense networks. Now, what's happening though is with the new wave of digital services, when we talk about self-driving car, when we talk about factory automation, when we talk about more intense performance required applications like remote surgeries and whatsoever, we are now looking into high performance networks that are specific to a use case and specific to a location. This is no more a coverage game. This is a specific quality of service, and this is a game of really intensifying the network performance in general. And again, I mean, most of the applications do require high reliability, and that is difficult to achieve because in the past, most of the spectrum that was used is also lower frequency. It was easy to cover longer distances. Now we are using much higher spectrum, frequency spectrum, and that is difficult to penetrate long distances as well. So most of the networks of the futures will be service-centric and location-centric, moving from that coverage best effort approach to performance approach. And because of that, probably, I mean, you might be familiar with the concept of, as we move along the journey, small cells or edge computing and all. because again, I mean, most of the even I mean consumer services on the IT space side of the things, like entertainment, on demand and all, as broadband grows, the shift to the adoption of these services grows, and for service provider point of view, it makes more sense to compute, store, and provide these services closer to the end users rather than data centers or networks far away from the end user. Therefore, I mean, it has a impact in terms of the structure of both IT and telecommunication networks meeting those requirements. So going forward, therefore, I think we are going to see more and more decentralized networks closer to end users, and I am talking about potentially edge data centers in every neighborhood and small cells where they are meant to be, like alongside a self-driving track of a road, but not necessarily everywhere and ubiquitous coverage anymore. I mean, it will be really service-centric. It will be closer to end user, and it will obviously come with a lot of investment requirement because I mean, fiber obviously needs to support all those connections, and the densification of fiber is inevitable from that era, from that perspective. So the purpose of these networks, new networks, should also be considered, because like if we talk about fiber, an FTTH fiber network may not be good enough to meet all these new industry-specific connections and connectivity on decentralized networks. If we are to talk about centralized or open radio access networks, for example, instead of a pair of fiber in every site, you may need fiber to each antenna that also is well coordinated between your tower location and your edge data center where you are computing, your baseband units, and also they might be a bit these might be a bit technical concepts for some of the audience, so I will not dive too large into that. But again, I mean, the deployment of the fiber, as much as I mean, we see quite a lot of investment and connectivity rate growing to the residents and businesses. From a networking and future networks point of view, we are still looking into a massive requirement on the fiber densification going forward. And that brings me a bit to the third pillar that I want to talk about, which are really about enabling factors all the way from investment policies, resources. And again, I mean, I want to connect that to this new digital infrastructure requirements in particular, because if you look into these densifications and decentralized networks all the way from small cells to edge data centers to fiber densification to between those facilities, fiber fabric, as a rule of thumb, probably we are looking at 10 times growth within the next 10 years. So that means, I mean, if there are 30,000 base stations in a country, probably we will have over 200,000 in 10 years' time. Not necessarily the same scale, same look, same type data centers. It can be small nodes in a building, office, or facility as well, but the densification will be quite high. Same goes to data centers. We are probably looking to move from tens of data centers in most countries today to hundreds of data centers going forward, including those edge data centers in particular. Same goes to fiber and fiber kilometers in each country as well. So that means, I mean, whatever we have achieved to date, we are going to invest and multiply it by a factor of 10. So what is obvious in this is that none of the service providers of today who have, deployed and operated these networks individually will be able to do it alone. So that's why, I mean, we see a great focus and shift to infrastructure sharing. To start with, I mean, most of the new technologies like 5G and all, I mean, they inherently recognize the importance of sharing, and I mean, they incorporate standards in terms of network slicing or sharing of computing, even on the core point of view, capacity and capabilities based on demand. So they are very dynamic in their nature. But also, I mean, what we have started to see in within the last 5 years in particular is acceleration of carving out infrastructure assets from vertically integrated businesses to separate vehicles, either by MNOs operating those vehicles or independent infrastructure providers, tower companies, fiber companies who are acquiring and operating and opening up those infrastructure for sharing. I think we will see this trend going forward accelerating. And I mean, in Africa, most of the towers have been already outsourced to tower costs. So is the new wave is now with fiber, probably was a second asset. Now we are looking probably the data centers, old BSC sites, old edge data center, which can be repurposed as edge data centers from an operator point of view with the new wave going forward. Yet, I mean, there is also a requirement to plan and coordinate these different asset categories holistically, because at the end of the day, if you want to get to a integrated network between that is well coordinated between your cell site radio network to edge data center to core, again, I mean, somebody needs to bring all this together. If it's on the hands of Infracos probably need to advance a bit more in terms of getting their networking skills improved to be able to plan those multi-network, multi-operator networks. So there is a lot to be done, therefore, from an Infracos point of view, lots of opportunities, lots of obviously investment required to achieve this. And we will see more and more acceleration of this infrastructure divestment by the vertically integrated operators into independent structures. And then, I mean, those structures evolving in the value chain to become more integrated operators of these networks, independent networks. So the roles are shifting, and we also see quite a lot of investment coming from the OTTs themselves on the continent, including data centers, including international fiber networks, and potentially even, you know, services running on those, such as e-commerce, as well as other basic services will be on the pipeline of those OTTs going forward. So the landscape is on a constant move. So what we should do from, again, I mean, probably coming back to the question in terms of South Africa's readiness, indeed, I mean, in all countries' readiness point of view, we really need to, if we want to be on the forefront side of these developments and moving to or embracing the digital economy, we need to enable all the resources that is going to underlie these services, such as spectrum. From a South African point of view in particular, I think it is really unfortunate that we haven't seen any spectrum coming to the market for the last 15 years. What is strange, though, is whoever you speak to, all the way from policymakers to regulators to players themselves, everybody agrees that this spectrum should be released. However, I mean, we haven't achieved that for 15 years. So, and we are coming to the 2-decade mark. And today, again, there are lots of still roadblocks in getting this spectrum out in terms of legal challenges and many others. So it is a bit uncertain what we are going to, where we are going to get there. And again, I mean, putting the targets, I think, is quite important to unlock the full potential of the digital economy. Again, I mean, we really need to put socioeconomic targets in terms of what we want to achieve, in my opinion, rather than number of schools, hospitals, or whatsoever. because I mean, at the end of the day, what matters is what we do with that services and how it impacts the day-to-day lives of the population. That's where the targets should shift. And again, I mean, if we are to come from that background then to a more holistic requirements of achieving those targets, then we will need to look into fiscal policies and all other enabling requirements, including spectrum within that light. Because sometimes the focus or justification of certain tools could be also very subjective, like pricing. There's a big debate in terms of pricing of data and all on the delays or on certain proposed interventions. Again, I mean, it's very subjective and it should be considered within the context, because at the end of the day, there is a cost of providing certain services, and that will depend on, I mean, recovery of that cost will depend on the volume that is offered as well. I mean, a very basic example I like to use is, I mean, you buy a car for 100,000 rand, and if you drive that car over a time, its lifetime 1,000 kilometers, your cost per kilometer comes to 100 rand. If you drive it for 100,000 kilometers, your cost is 1 rand per kilometer, right? So accordingly, I mean, if your services from a telco point of view are able to reach millions of people, with higher data consumption, obviously then your unit cost or price can be much lower. But due to other reasons, including accessing that services through end user devices, due to taxes on it or whatsoever, if you are not your services are not being uptaken, if you are not able to cover your costs, I mean, that becomes a disincentive to invest further as well. So again, I mean, this is a deep topic. We can go into this in detail as well, but I think the whole message I'm trying to probably underline over here is really looking to focus on the end outcomes and what we want to achieve, put targets there, not intermediary figures in general. In terms of therefore, I mean, enabling the future infrastructure in my and unlocking full digital economy, we also need to be cognizant of the risk, and probably, I mean, we need to be very clear in terms of what we need to regulate as well, because markets, I mean, free markets are quite dynamic in sorting out some of the complexities and, really ensuring assurances on service delivery and fair approach to those services as well. But what is being overlooked today is some of the dangers that is coming from this fast adoption of digital services as well. Like I talked about e-commerce, I think, I mean, throughout COVID, we have seen massive uptake in terms of e-commerce, which also opened lots of opportunities for fraudsters to come and establish, fake services and offer, and indeed, I mean, deceive people's perspective of these, e-commerce services. And many people have been a victim of those frauds on the financial point of view, or you buy something which is never delivered because the company is fake, or even on the new trend of cryptocurrency point of view, lots of globally, I mean, these intermediary transaction platforms have disappeared overnight. I think, I mean, those are the real dangers that we need to focus on in terms of where we are going with this digital economy and services, because it is moving too fast. Where should be the focus of the regulators and legislators over there? Because, I mean, most of the time we follow the developments a bit behind, and where we take actions in terms of intervention, it is not the right point. I mean, sometimes we see a well-competing economy where government wants to come and intervene because they pursue there's no effective competition or whatsoever. So we really need to be careful about where the real impact is and how we get to realization of full digital economy by avoiding the pitfalls in between as well. I'll just, pause there. I've been talking for the last 45 minutes to see, if there are any questions, or maybe Juanita, if you want to add and make any comments as well, then we can continue with the last few minutes of the webinar.
Thank you, Bora. I don't know if there's any comments or questions so far from anybody on the chat. It's really informative. One of my key concerns often is, and I think we experience that, is government's ability to adjust regulation with the pace, of the sector. I always feel like they're trying to play a catch-up game as opposed to, being sort of more leading, the sector. But, we say that, but at the same time, we're concerned about over-regulation as well. And do you think that the capability, the capacity, and the political will sits within government to help steer this digital economy into a direction where we, can have an all-inclusive, transparent, sustainable future?
Look, I think, by all means, all the intentions are coming from a good place, from a government or regulator point of view. I think, as you said, I think the problem is the very fast pace of the industry and how the things are evolving over time, because game is changing for most of the players in a matter of couple of years. Services like voice and short messaging and all is no more key service for the most of the communication service providers. It moved to OTTs. Most of these are almost free to as long as you have a data connection. Again, where the focus should be is really the end goals that we want to achieve on it. That's my point of, let's start with putting, like South Africa's broadband policy, right? What we are trying to, what the set goals are, a certain number of facilities connected with certain speed, or from a broadband point of view. I think it is halfway. If we are to stuck there, we will never see the real impact on the economy or on the outcomes, because again, what does it mean to connect a hospital with a broadband connection if that is used only on the reception area with a Wi-Fi node that is working half time? Sometimes we find that kind of examples, or connecting a school, probably, teachers are sitting from their home teaching to students who are also their home. Again, it's not a, clear measure. So I think, we need to start with what we want to achieve really as an outcome, and work from there backwards in terms of what holistically needs to happen. And those measures needs to align with those targets. If we do that, then I think some of those questions in terms of is there enough competition, is there enough resources, is the price fair or not, will be much easier to address, in my opinion.
Sorry, still after all this time, still sometimes can't find the mute button. So I see that Francois typed up something, Francois with American Tower Corporation. So he says, telecommunications infrastructure is a facilitator of the digital economy, and infrastructure deployment has many barriers to entry. So restrictive regulations and policy, can't agree more, access to state, municipal property, cost and time. And then he says, how do we collaboratively unlock these barriers for the global, for the betterment of all the parties that want to participate,
I think, in my opinion, again, instead of interventions on the supply level, I think the interventions on the demand side should be more prioritized, because at the end of the day, if the adoption of digital technologies move fast, that creates opportunities, opens up space for more players to play, and in a free market space, there will be opportunities for all. So if, therefore, I think, if the focus should shift from supply side to demand side and, real use cases around there. And more stimulation rather than introducing additional competition to free market players. So that is a starting point. And if we do that, then on those dynamics, it will drive adoption faster. The adoption will drive need for infrastructure, digital infrastructure faster. That will mean, investment requirements will be there and investment will be easier to tap into as well. Because there is a dynamic that is driven from the demand side. It's not like you are establishing infrastructure and forcing a use case to commercialize that. So more pull than push. So again, most of the current, especially, if you look into South African dynamics over here, most of the proposed interventions are on the supply side and not necessarily aligned with the reality of the market today. And I think, we really need to shift that focus to demand side and how we stimulate the demand side more holistically to achieve the outcome. Because at the end of the day, that means more opportunities for everyone. And I don't think, if you look into, again, talking from South Africa, a number of companies that emerged and transacted from an investment point of view within the last decade. Besides the incumbents, there are quite a few, and there are quite a successful number of ventures that came out of this marketplace that kind of proves that where there's opportunity, there is a space to play for everyone.
Certainly, I know, because we often move in the same circles, but we host an annual investors day, and we agree that there's enough appetite there. The problem is not on the investment side. There's certainly enough money to go around, but investors are looking for, an industry where there's some security around, the project planning and, the time that it will take for them to see some of the profits from their investment. Bora, the other thing I wanted to ask you, I think in closing, if there's not another question, is that, of course, even since COVID, we've seen like a government really starting to participate with private sector, reaching out to private sector. I always used to, we used to refer to our sector as the quiet engine of the economy because, we almost never featured. People just assumed that, I don't know, something made all the connectivity happen. But do you think that there's too many disparate things going on? We're seeing SA Connect, but at provincial government level, you're seeing its own strategies, and at municipal level, there's strategies, and everybody seems to be coming up, with something. Or do you think that all of them roll up into something that's meaningful, or do you think that there's an opportunity for closer collaboration?
I think, Juanita, to be honest, some of those things really goes in silos still, and implementation also is a question mark. If you put up a policy 10 years ago, I think first real move on SA Connect was 2013 draft, if I'm not wrong, and it's almost now 10 years, right, since then. And your implementation in terms of the set targets are way behind where they are supposed to be. It may be relevant at the time. It's just not, relevant today. And then you need to really adapt those targets with the reality of the market and, define what would be the enabling interventions or policies going forward. And to be honest, in all those debates, again, I will come back to the simple fact of spectrum, for example, and I do not understand why spectrum cannot be made available in 15 years. And whatever form it comes to the market, and there are lots of debate in terms of inclusion, exclusion of certain players and whatsoever. But if you look into what's happening on the market, that spectrum somehow finds its way to meaningful use between the players. So the market sorts itself out where the resource is available. Today, I think the main priority should be making those resources available, removing the barriers, and whatever is the shortcomings on the implementation can be dealt with much easier than thinking too long and really being slow in acting some of the potentials. In terms of, intentions or willingness of private sector to bridge the digital divide, I think there's no question. The willingness is there. It's just that, it has to come with certainty in terms of policy framework. Because if today, we can name it as well, if MTN and Vodacom was to go and, improve their further infrastructure in the rural areas, and then someone comes and say, yeah, but these are already sunk assets, and you have to open this up below cost or at cost. Again, some of those things are really needs to be taught in the context of what the end goal is, because if certain players invest in certain things and kind of achieve the demand on their services, they shouldn't be punished for that. I think I fundamentally kind of do not align with some of the proposed interventions going forward. It has to be again left to market dynamics, and I think there is enough willingness to overcome most of the challenges, because again, if I come back to some of the other basic services on the continent, from electrification to water and sanitation to transport and all, most of these things have been pursued as monopolies by the governments to achieve universal access and all. It's just that, even telecom's point of view, if you look into initial fixed networks and all, most of those was only reaching to a less than 1% of the population at the time. Now, with the achievement, I think, and the willingness is quite evident with now more than half the population is connected. So I don't think there is a lack of willingness. It is more about really enabling and creating certainty in terms of where the government actions are. And, if there is certainty, the investment follows certainty. Simple as that.
Cannot agree with you, Mom. Thank you for your time, Bora. Really appreciate it. And like you said, it was short notice. And thanks that we can always rely on you. It's always an interesting conversation that's taking place. I hope that over time, with the work that we're all doing combinedly, we can solve some of these issues. But I will thank you so much. And like you said, congratulations to everybody that participates in this economy and that's trying to change it. And I've got no doubt that if we all push together, we'll get there eventually.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for having me today. And I'm really be honored to be part of this discussion, Vanita.
Most welcome. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And we will be in touch very soon.